Wafube. This is Misael Bay, aka Warlock Asylum, and tonight we're coming at you with another episode of Raw Talk, where it's just no makeup and we just talk or whatever. So this episode is called "What Should Moorish Americans Know About Etymology?" and applies to occultists, researchers, and anyone who wants to get the best that they can out of etymology, especially when it concerns ethnic studies. The reason for this video are several, um, which I'll discuss right now. I'm gonna try to keep it on more upbeat, vibe this week. So I have a couple of other videos coming up. So definitely, before we really get into it, hit the subscribe button, push the like button, so it's a mutual form of support, and thank people for the support that they provided just in coming by and watching the videos and commenting. So one reason why I want to bring some of this information into light is because it was something I had saw actually on a different YouTube channel, and it was with a individual named Brother Polite. He was talking to this Muslim brother, and he was like, Greek is an older language than Arabic, and and I got the references to prove it. That may be, there may be references, but the statement is incorrect. And I'm going to tell you why. At one time, it was taught that Greece was the world's first civilization. And we know that's not true, that there were other civilizations that preceded it. The nation state of Israel, during the biblical era, Kemet, Mesopotamia, just a lot of just different, civilizations that existed before Greece. Okay. However, when they were teaching that Greece was the, world's first civilization, they had to take the etymological dictionaries and make them reflect that. So everything was switched around to reflect Greece. That's why sometimes when you see people and they're looking up stuff and says, the origin of the term Moor is Greek or it's Roman, that's not necessarily true because of how history was tampered with. If you want to tamper with history, start tampering with the origin of words. Now, here's something that you'll find very useful. Etymology is actually a subset of history. In history, with dealing with historical documents, you actually have tangible evidence that people lived here, they existed here, etc. With etymology, it's not just finding out the origin of a word, but how a word moves through languages. Like for example, there were times that the Greeks spent with the Egyptians. What are some words that they got? What were some of the words that developed into the Greek language by them borrowing certain terms from Egypt? I'm saying, if you in someone else's house or nation, you refer to things a certain way, and this becomes later, it just becomes transcribed into the people's languages. It's like the term chop chop. You know, you go to Chinese restaurant and someone's like chop chop, and these dudes is laughing behind the counter, probably disrespecting the lady. They want to order some, chicken wings and fries or whatever. And next thing you know, it becomes a joke, and then it becomes a neighborhood joke, and it becomes new slang, and it comes into, the community. And next thing you know, you see the term on television. You know, However, what's the origin of the word? Where did it come from? Okay. Why am I bringing this up? Because most people know who are watching this video what etymology um, is for a very important reason. Um, Outside of the Greek context, that Greece was the world's first civilization, and they started adjusting the um, etymological dictionaries to reflect that. Something else happened. As time passed, it's disproven that Greece is the world's first civilization. However, this idea has risen again, and I've heard Moors use the term and not know what it meant. It's called the Proto-Indo-European language. Remember that, the Proto-Indo-European language. And a lot of times you would see in a lot of dictionaries this thing coming up. So let me explain my experience with it, and that would just tell you everything. You know, most people know, I'm a shaman, alchemist, or whatever. And, I came through various studies. Well, anyway, one day I was trying to find the origin of the term necro. It's a Greek term called necro. And I looked in the etymological dictionary, and it says that it comes from the Indo-European language. I was like, wow, I never heard of this before. Sounds real ancient. You know what I'm saying? Proto-Indo-European language. Let me check out, what this means or whatever. Like, I was really excited because originally I knew the Greeks had studied in Kemet, or Egypt, as some people call it, and that the word necro, for me, for my theory before going into the etymology of it, was that the Greeks studied in Egypt, and there's an Egyptian god called Nekhbet. It's a vulture goddess, and a lot of its characteristics are associated with death because, um, like her deityship, or however you want to call it, was associated with this pit they would put people in. The vultures would come down. That was her totem. These vultures would come down and pick away, at the carcasses that were left out, I guess, for people who broke the law or whatever. So I'm thinking along these terms, and I come along this term called Proto-Indo-European language. So I looked the language up. I didn't even do any deep research like that. And I think I looked into Wikipedia, and it said that there's no historical evidence that this language exists. In one line, you have to really catch it. It just says that in one line openly. It's not even at the footnotes, it's in the article. So I says, wow, you mean they're going to put a language in, you know, etymology dictionaries, and there's no historical evidence that it existed? I was like, man, this is crazy. So then I was like, well, let me look further. And so then I started looking into literary sources, and I found out that during Britain's occupation of India, a person by the name of Sir William Jones, who's very revered by modern day Nazis, had discovered that Sanskrit was more complex than Greek language. So he was like, man, there had to be a European language. Like, yo, we can't let these dudes, he was just floored by it. Like, how this ethnic language is more complex than Greek. And that, you know, and also, if Sanskrit is more complex than Greek, then it messes with this idea that they were promoting at the time, that Greece was the world's first civilization. So he came up with this idea that there must have been an older language than Greek. And that's how the Proto-Indo-European language got started. So what they did is they start making this circumstantial evidence. They start getting all these linguistic gurus together, and they were like, look, man, we got to create a language. I'm saying a language that in recorded history is not spoken, but guess what? It's in the etymology dictionaries. It's in a lot of them. I think all of them you're going to find this term Proto-Indo-European language. The language never existed. It's completely theoretical. And although they talk about all this stuff, even if, let's just say, there was a mother tongue to all of those languages that they're claiming, why couldn't they say it was Sanskrit? Once he found out that that Sanskrit was more complex than Greek, then why didn't Sir William Jones say, you know what, this could be the language? Instead, they create a language, put the word European in it, and it's in all the etymology dictionaries, and it never existed. You know what I'm saying? It never existed. Now, what's even sadder is that as far as critiquing and calling, pulling out the racial card about what this, is going on, I'm the only person who's written articles about it and have debated with people in literary circles about it, you know. And so we just want the fire to get out there. Like, look, man, you can't just take a language you made up and put it in a reference book and think that it's going to fly. You know what I'm saying? But that's how you control history. Because what happens is after our generation passes, a couple more generations, and I even hear people who are supposedly woke, conscious Moors talking about a Proto Indo European language, and the language doesn't exist. So after, our generation pass on and stuff, the kids that are coming up after that, that's just rewriting history. So now, if you want to, you can just totally wipe out history because now the word necro is coming from not from the Egyptian deity Nekbet, because historically the Greeks spent time with the Egyptians. It will make sense. It's coming from the Proto-Indo-European language. Now, in order to substantiate that historically, we have to move the Greeks out of Egypt and say that they spent time with the Proto Indo Europeans. They never left Europe and were able to advance themselves as a society. So they just cut Egypt off out the map. You know what I'm saying? And that's what's coming. And it's sad because no one's on the front speaking about it. People are talking about this thing with ID cards and the law and stuff like that. This is what's going on around you. And the sad thing about it is that I had the wake up call this week because I put out one article, and one article was about Kemet. And I think it was in the last video, why the prophet didn't go that way about pantheonic worship because the Egyptians had became corrupt. You know what I'm saying? And if there's one thing that Moorish Americans, or people who claim to be woke, can learn from European scholarship is it's non-biased. And what I mean by that, yes, some of it they play games, like I'm just talking about the games that they play in. However, if you look at the way Rome is depicted, it you given everything. You given the decadence, you given its, how it fell, its immorality, its traditions, its superior air. You given all of that about Rome by its descendants. And why are they doing that? Because they don't want their children making the same mistakes. So they're like, look, this is what Rome did. This is why they fell. Now, when I put this article out, a couple of people start quoting Dr. Ben and everything, and that's not even the issue. Dr. Ben's role and, Dr. John Henry Clark role in all of this was pretty much to show that this advanced civilization, was founded and authored by quote unquote black people. That's what their books talk about. However, no one book can cover all of history. You know what I'm saying? And as long as man, is dealing with trying to cultivate himself, which the game changes for every generation, you're going to have some stuff going on that shouldn't be going on. Now, a lot of times people will try to write it out of history. For example, you look at the Bible and you hear stories about the Israelites constantly turning to other gods. Well, perhaps there was another cult there, and the cult of Yahweh didn't want people to even know in the future about it. So they just said they turned to other gods, but there was actually literally other cults that existed in Israel. The Yahweh cult became most prominent because it had some power, but it had more power because it was able to blot out history. So instead of saying, like, different Israelites worship, different gods, you know, um, no, they was just turning away from this one God, Yahweh. And we know that's a false. How we know that? It's because everyone's heard the story of the Good Samaritans, right? Now, the Good Samaritan, people know the story, but guess what? Samaritans, if you read Second Kings, they were worshiping the Babylonian god Nergal, which actually I'm initiated in his rites. And it says when Yahweh, they were trying to convert the Samaritans and or convert these people who were worshiping the Gal. And so it says Yahweh sent like, or Jehovah, whatever, sent lions, and the people still was like, nah, we ain't worshiping your God. We're gonna keep worshiping the Gal. And they became to be known as Samaritans. So we know there was other cults and stuff that existed, but I didn't want to digress too much. I just thought, I rock a jewel while I'm in the moment. However, the main thing is that those, that people, they can blot out history if they can control the etymology. So what I'm saying is that getting back into this about research and stuff, I was losing track where I was at. This guy starts writing about Dr. Ben and all this crazy stuff, and it's like, yo, this ain't even about that. I read Dr. Ben. I know Dr. Ben, Naeem Akbar, all these dudes, but you know, the guy who wrote Stolen Legacy, all of that stuff. Those things are fine. But now you going around and you claiming to be righteous or holy or in tune with the great God, Allah, and all this crazy stuff. And then you trying to circumvent a natural process. You see what I'm saying? When people start doing certain things, calamity is coming to them. It's not like, maybe people may be like, in a persona God, like, oh man, God gonna do this. No, it's just your actions. You got to get it on with life. And if you act in a certain way, certain things is going to happen in the same way that you could say, hey, if I meditate, if I use this affirmation, this is going to happen. You can do that in reverse and something else is going to happen. So when you start seeing records of people doing certain things, you know what I'm saying? It doesn't matter who was going to come. It was eventually going to happen because the majority outweighed the people who were trying to do the right thing. And eventually, this, this balance totters and, some sort of repercussion comes along. And that's how that works. So Egypt fell because they were falling off. You know what I'm saying? You trying to tell people that life, you got everything right in life and someone can come and just take everything away. No, there's some parts of that, I mean, it was, even if you read any of the literature from Elijah or whatever, as far as the fall of the quote unquote black man, it was because he had to learn a lesson. And so, and if you don't get how the lesson was learned, then you doomed to repeat it. History will always repeat itself if you're standing in the same place. And if you don't get the lesson, it's going to repeat itself. So if I say something out of critique, I can critique because those are my ancestors. I can say something about most of the nations of earth because I'm related to most of those people. You know what I'm saying? But specifically in Egypt, because the brother was like, well, you ain't going to talk about my ancestors like that. And that's not how you teach. Whether it's Asian people, Caucasian people, they're going to tell you the full story because they don't want their children repeating the stuff. But with us, it's like we make a religion like even another article, and this was a written article I posted about how the Portuguese, when they was using the term Moor, it's used synonymous with like jinn or genie to mean like divine being, and I gave references, and one of the references was about these Moorish sorcerers. Moorish sorcerers don't believe in Islam. You know what I'm saying? And so in the reference, it was written like in the 1800s, but it was talking about an earlier time period when Moors were in Spain. They would piss on the Quran. They would come in during some of the holidays, chase some of the Muslims guards who would remain there and come and piss on the Quran because they didn't care for it. Now some brothers like, oh man, that's mad. Yo, B, this is what happened. You know what I'm saying? But instead, a lot of people want this cookie cut history. You can't go anywhere with that because you look unreal. If you're going to tell the truth, tell what really happened so you can get a clear view of the whole situation that was going on instead of thinking that everything was all good and someone came with a big bag and and all this kind of stuff and just robbed everybody. There was stuff going on in these nations. You know what I'm saying? They were great nations. However, when they start going against certain divine principles, these nations began to fail. You know what I'm saying? And in that is a lesson. But if you're gonna, this, that, and the other, you're not gonna get the lesson. You know what I'm saying? And I get why it happens. It's not really the brother's fault or the other brother's fault. A lot of times it's what we box ourselves into. I had began studies in quote unquote Afrocentristic thought like over 30 years ago. You know what I mean? And then I would say began merging when I started going through shamanic initiations, and I started going to shamanic initiations, and then I just didn't read material from my early travels in a while, because when you initiate it, information comes to you in the way of epiphany, and you can research it, and it usually checks spot on. That's how you could tell if you're dealing with a deceptive force or something that's on point. So a lot of times, I had a relationship, but still do with the jinn and other, forces or whatever. So that's what I would write on, what I'm saying, my direct relationship. You know what I'm saying? I was from the viewpoint like, look, man, you can either get this from a guy who really doesn't know what's going on in the world, or you can get this from an actual spiritual creature who's been around for a couple of thousand years. I took the latter option. I don't see why that's wrong. Okay. Aside from all of that, I start going back and I start reading some of these books that are popular in the Afrocentristic community, and they're truthful in what they're saying, but they're not academic. And why they're not academic is because they over exaggerate adjectives like African and black. Like you open up a book and on each page it got like, African and black 20 or 30 times on each page, and it's a 200-page book. How you going to bring that into schools of academia? And then all these books are written by Masons. You know what I'm saying? That's another point, but I'm not going to get into that today. I go into that into another video. However, you open these books up and it's saying African or black 10 or 15 times a page, and it's like 300 pages, 250 pages, and stuff like that. That's like you opening up a book and it reading European 15 times on each page. What would you say? Now you're going to bring this to academia, and then the stupid thing about it is when these dudes can't get their way, or they feel like, you know, they're congested, they don't know what to say, then right away they go into something like, oh, well, those are European references. Didn't Malcolm X use European references? You know what I'm saying? Then on top of this dude is reading out of a Circle 7, which, like some of it, part of it, material is in the Aquarian Gospel. And he's talking about, well, the European references, like, come on, man, that's weak. You know what I'm saying? A lot of leaders use references. The point is the reference credible? Is it truth or not? It's not like who wrote it, because then you getting into something that you're not supposed to be getting into. You know what I'm saying? Which is the race baiting game. You just switching terms from black and white to European and Asiatic. That's all you're doing at that point. If you're gonna say this, even in the Circle 7, it says, be a friend to humanity. Stop the silliness, picking and choosing what you want to take out the text, and then b- isolating yourself with these references, books that are just more like masturbatory texts. Like they're masturbation texts where you feel good reading it because you looking at yourself, you pleasuring yourself. You know what I'm saying? Get to some stuff real, otherwise you're gonna be hoodwinked. Like people are being hoodwinked by the Proto-Indo-European language. You know what I'm saying? Stop following all this crazy stuff. You know what I'm saying? I didn't want to really get into one of them type of videos, but it was just on my mind. So I was like, I was just say it because I was surprised last week that people can actually see what was going on with their own people, and like that's something an ignorant person does. If it happened, it happened. You know what I'm saying? You just got like, okay, we can't do that anymore. These people were great football players. They were this and that. You know what I'm saying? They were real good in military politics and stuff. However, we can't, put aside from that. And like I said in the video, a lot of the moral code today sexually comes out of Islam. It doesn't come out of those errors because those errors of Kemet was highly sexualized. You know what I'm saying? Um, so those I just got into that because I find that the research in certain communities that's supposed to be woke is actually kind of shabby. And even when it comes to the point of the Proto-Indo-European language, a fictional language that's being used in reference books, I haven't seen any other written criticisms of it than the ones I post on my magazine. I don't get it. You know what I'm saying? This stuff is going on around you and they're setting the stage to push Kemet out the way completely and make a new stage. And y'all sitting around, you know, just talking about, other stuff or whatever. I hope this video brings awareness to people who are watching it, and for all those people who are trying to do the right thing or working on themselves and, you know, really trying to make the work happen, really trying to make the world a better place by making themselves better people, you know, um, peace and blessings, man. You guys are, giving me a lot of inspiration and a lot of guidance and knowledge over the years. You know what I'm saying? You know who you are. So I look forward to talking to you again this week and push the like button, add a comment or two, and we'll talk a little bit more. Wafube.